Hi, I'm Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my video of how I painted purple crocus patch. Around here in my area of the east coast of Pennsylvania, one of the very first spring flowers to bloom is the crocus. The crocus comes in my area in white and yellow and purple. As I was dreaming of springtime coming, all I could think of was purple crocuses and my beautiful patches out front in my garden. Couldn't wait to see them, and I decided to pull up some reference photos and go ahead and try to paint one. This was a really complicated painting. Hope you enjoy it. Give me a thumbs up, please. And now let's paint. I began this painting by using some masking fluid. The photographic reference I was looking at was all purple flowers and a few of the spiky leaves that come up around them. I did not want to mix up the purple with this brilliant springtime yellow-green. So I thought I'd better preserve the color of these spikes, these spiky leaves. The crocus patch was lit up by strong sunlight on one side and dark shade on the other, so it provided a nice contrast. Anything that stood out as brilliantly white or a patch of sunlight on the actual petals or flowers, I also preserved with some masking fluid. While I had all of these little petals or leaves drying, I got out a piece of scrap paper and started playing around with the colors that were on my palette. I was wondering if I should mix some really good strong paint up ahead, or if I should do my mixing on the paper, layer by layer and in a glaze. Well, in the meantime, I pulled out some of my favorite colors. I had Windsor Violet and Quinacridone Magenta and Quin Violet. I tried Cobalt Blue, Ultramarine Blue, and some Permanent Pink. I mixed various mixtures of all these different kinds of paints just to see which ones would do what together, because I knew I wanted a great variety of purple or lavender colors for this particular painting. Mixing colors is always fun anyway, to me. It feels a little bit like playing. And I love to play around with art. And my leaves were dry, my masking was dry. On to the fun part, and then see what kind of hard work I wanted to do to complete it. Let's skip ahead here. This is 443. Nope. Nix that. Back to the leaves and the painting. Just for some color inspiration, I got out a piece of amethyst that was sitting on my desk and put it down. I drew in the basic size and form of one of the biggest foreground flowers, just so I would keep myself from going too small on the flower size. After I did that, I sprayed the paper down and got it good and wet and began to come in with some random flower type forms. I was trying to keep in mind to keep a couple of whites or lighter colored areas. We'll see how well I did. Here I'm using different combinations of all the colors you saw me mix up before. And this truly is fun, this part. Because it's not a lot of work. The top outer edge of the painting or the photograph had very much more purple blue flowers. And they were more of a pink type of purple toward the middle and lower bottom. Now we all know watercolor gets a lot lighter and paler as it dries. So I'm trying to lay in some heavier and then heavier concentrations as I go. What you're seeing me do right now is remove paint. I'm taking a damp brush and wiping it across the wet paint and then drying it on my paper towel. With that particular technique, I can put some lines back in a pale or white color. And I had decided to do this to add a little bit more structure to the flowers. This is not really a planned painting. This is just playing around with purple crocuses. Now the next day we take a look at the colors. And to me, I was disappointed. I thought I had them good and concentrated, and they just got so light. So I decided I was going to be doing a glazing type of approach and building up colors step by step. Where to start was I decided to shade around the outer petals of some of the flowers to form where the petal positive shapes were going to be. So it's sort of a kind of negative painting that I'm doing. If I draw around the outer edges of the leaf or petal, and then I blend it outward with some water, I can form the shapes of the flowers. So I'm traveling around flower by flower by flower, outlining the shape in various ways. The first way is simply outline the shape and then blend it inward with water so it is not a hard edge line. The second way is to paint a dark shadow around the flower or in some areas of the flower, which you can see I've done with the green there, which then makes the flower pop out in the areas that I want it to. The last way I'm painting some shades into the various petals of the flowers so that each one will begin to stand out. And I'm shaping these petals as well because the petals are cupped and they should be darker toward the center and inside and lighter along the edges. Of course, they're so busy and so crowded in there together that they're forcing each other into some unusual shapes. So I have some leeway. I am planning to make many of these flower petals a deeper color of purple. For right now, I thought it might be a good idea just to get them started with some shape and some form. At this point, I have outlined and suggested the forms of many of the flowers. What I'm doing is bringing in the darks that do show between some of the flower areas to see how well they work with the shape of the flower in general and the whole composition. I thought that might give me a better idea of how to proceed with the composition. This whole thing is an experiment. It's very unplanned, and I've never done anything quite like it before. In my artwork, I like to be free to do that because I learn some things, and I learn what works, and I learn what sure as heck doesn't work for me. So the deepest darks are coming in to some areas here. And then it's back to shaping some flower forms here and there in between. So you get the idea of how I'm working with this painting. I'm adding my darks, keeping my lights, shaping out the petals, and drawing or shaping out the forms of each individual flower. They're complicated and they're interesting, so I'm just taking it as a puzzle type of challenge and step by step pulling it together. For the next areas that I plan to paint in, I'm removing some color first. This is to form the edge of petals, which is usually much lighter. So can you see where I've taken off some color at the top on the left side to form some edges of petals that I can then paint around and make into flower forms? Now, in case it's any help, to form a cupped shaped petal, I leave the edge lighter and I fold it around the mid-colored tin. Where the folds appear, I go darker, and toward the center, I go darker. And that's what you just saw me doing on that one petal. I'm pulling some color off of the cup of that bottom purple petal. So you see now how it's lighter around the edge, darker inside, and then as it goes back out, it also goes lighter again. This is also how the lines of a flower petal sometimes go. They follow that cup. So look closely at your petals if you want to do something like this kind of approach. And look how these little fine lines in the petals are formed and the directions they go. It helps to give the eye some directionality to follow for each little flower form. You might notice that the whole composition flower forms appear to get lighter occasionally. The reason for that is because they sat out all night drying and the colors faded. With each new painting session, I'm adding more layer of glazing and color to try to build up the vividness of the petals and the flowers. If you put your paint down and you're always blotting it away, you're going to be doing a lot more layers. The more layers you do, the more danger you run into of starting to get your colors muddy. So if you're using good clean colors that work together, keep using lots of water to wash in, keep using your paper towels, and don't introduce anything weird and different without trying it out and experimenting on a smaller area first. Which is what I'm doing right now, introducing a different color. Guess I better be careful. My reason for including this new color, which is vermilion, is because the stamens of the crocuses are a brilliant orange, yellow, vermilion type of shade. And with a fragile, delicate little flower like this, a brilliant color right next to it's going to reflect in a blurry type of way onto the individual petals, in some cases. So I began to put down the areas that are near the stamens and mix a little vermilion in there. And I liked it a lot. This painting is taking a lot more patience than I ever anticipated. If I'd wanted something simpler to work with, I probably should have chosen a study of 2 or 3 flowers. But as it is, this clump, which is all growing and mushed together and enthusiastic, is quite a challenge. It's a really interesting one, though. And I'm beginning to see the center form of this clump. And moving on outward. So we're going to be breaking this particular video up into 2 sections. It does take a long time, and maybe you'll learn something from each of the sections, because I still have a lot of big blurs here, as you can see. But I do have many of the flowers defined at this point. And if you look closely, you'll see the petals. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Can you help me out and give me a thumbs up and subscribe below? It really helps. Thanks a lot. There's more links below that you can check out too. Maybe with some helpful or some interesting information for you. If you have any questions or thoughts to share, please write them in the comments. I'd love to see your responses, and I'll try hard to answer everybody who writes. For now, you have a nice day, and I'll see you next video.